Commander Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty and watched the alien ship circle his vessel like sharks around wounded prey. His ship looked nothing like the sleek craft that surrounded them. Where the alien vessels curved and flowed like living metal, the Liberty was all angles and hard lines. Steel plating covered every surface and weapon barrels stuck out from the hull like the spines of some metal beast. The humans had built their first deep space warship the only way they knew how, with tools and methods that had served them well on Earth. The bridge hummed with quiet activity as his crew prepared for what might be the most important meeting in human history. Communications Officer Danny Roberts sat at his station monitoring the chatter between alien ships. His young face showed concentration as he filtered through dozens of different languages and transmission types. Science Officer Patricia Young hunched over her displays, analyzing the energy signatures of every ship in the area. Her red hair fell across her face as she worked, but she paid no attention to anything except her data. Engineer Susan Hayes called up from the engine room through the intercom. Her voice carried the slight accent of someone who had grown up in the industrial cities of the American Midwest. She reported that all systems were running at peak efficiency and that the fusion reactors were stable. The Liberty might look crude compared to the alien ships, but every system had been tested and retested until it was as reliable as human engineering could make it. Captain Lisa Martinez walked onto the bridge carrying a tablet filled with diplomatic protocols and first contact procedures. She was the civilian in charge of this mission, while Jake commanded the military aspects. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her uniform showed the crisp lines that marked her as Career State Department. She had spent months preparing for this moment, studying what little information Earth had gathered about alien civilizations and their customs. The massive space station called Nexus Prime hung in the distance like a small moon. Its surface bristled, with docking bays and communication arrays. Ships from a dozen different species were moored to its hull. Some of the vessels were so strange that human eyes could barely make sense of their design. Others seemed to be made of pure energy held in some kind of containment field. The Liberty looked positively primitive next to such displays of advanced technology. Jake had read the files on the three main species that controlled the Galactic Council. The Vorthak were crystalline beings who looked like living gemstones. They controlled much of the manufacturing in this part of the galaxy. The Luminari were beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form millions of years ago. They handled most diplomatic functions. The Qatari were insect-like creatures with a rigid military hierarchy that enforced council law throughout their territory. Danny Roberts suddenly straightened at his station and turned to face the command crew. His headset crackled with incoming transmissions from the station. The aliens were ready to begin the formal first contact protocols. A docking bay had been assigned to the Liberty, and the council representatives were gathering in the main conference chamber. As they approached the station, Jake could see the alien ships more clearly. The Vorthak vessels seemed to be grown rather than built with organic curves that caught and reflected light in beautiful patterns. The Luminari ships were barely visible, as they existed partly in normal space and partly in some other dimension. The Qatari warships were dark and angular, but their angles were different from human design, somehow more menacing and predatory. The docking procedure went smoothly despite the differences in technology. Human magnetic clamps locked onto Vorthak docking rings, while Luminari energy fields guided the ship into perfect alignment. The station's artificial gravity felt slightly different from Earth normal, but within acceptable parameters. Captain Martinez gathered her diplomatic team while Jake selected his security detail. Chief Petty Officer Ryan Clark would accompany them as a technical advisor. His job was to observe and analyze any technology they encountered. Weapons Officer Carl Johnson would provide security, along with 2 Marines. The team was small, but represented the best Earth had to offer. The walk through Nexus Prime was like stepping into a science fiction movie. The corridors were filled with beings that challenged everything humans thought they knew about life in the universe. Some walked on 2 legs like humans, but others floated or crawled or moved in ways that had no Earth equivalent. The architecture itself seemed to shift and change as they walked, responding to the needs of different species. The main conference chamber was enormous, with a domed ceiling that showed a perfect view of the stars outside. Representatives from dozens of species filled tiered seating areas, each section designed for the specific needs of different life forms. At the center of the chamber stood a raised platform where the Galactic Council held court. Admiral Chen Zhao of the Council Defense Force was the first to address the human delegation. He was Vorthak, and his crystalline body refracted the chamber lights into rainbow patterns. When he spoke, his voice had a musical quality that somehow conveyed both beauty and arrogance. He welcomed the humans with words that were technically polite but carried an undertone of condescension that needed no translation. The formal presentations began with each species demonstrating their contributions to galactic civilization. The Vorthak showed holographic displays of their manufacturing capabilities and the crystal cities they had built on 100 worlds. The Luminari demonstrated their mastery over energy and their ability to travel between dimensions. The Qatari displayed their military might with images of vast fleets that patrolled the galaxy, maintaining peace through strength. When it came time for the human presentation, Captain Martinez stood and activated her own holographic display. She showed images of Earth with its blue oceans and white clouds. She spoke of human achievements in art and science and exploration. She explained how humans had overcome wars and disease and environmental destruction to reach for the stars. The alien representatives listened politely, but Jake could see the dismissive expressions on many faces. To them, humanity was just another primitive species taking its first steps into a larger universe. They had seen thousands of such species over the millennia, and most followed predictable patterns of development. Speaker Vex Thul rose from his position at the center of the council platform. He was the eldest of the Vorthak representatives, and his crystalline form had grown complex patterns over centuries of life. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of ages, and his words would determine humanity's place in the galactic community. The speaker began with what seemed like praise, but Jake recognized the trap being laid. The aliens were preparing to offer humanity a place in their civilization, but not as equals. The terms they were about to present would reduce Earth to a client state, providing raw materials and labor, while contributing nothing of real value to galactic culture. Jake caught the eye of his crew members and saw that they understood the situation as well as he did. Danny Roberts was already monitoring alien communications, and his expression suggested the news was not good. Patricia Young was taking readings on everything in the chamber, storing data that might prove valuable later. Susan Hayes was analyzing the station's power systems through her handheld scanner. The moment of truth was approaching, and humanity's future hung in the balance. The Galactic Council was about to make their offer, and Jake suspected it would be one that no proud species could accept. The real question was what would happen when the humans refused to bow down to alien superiority. Speaker Vexthul raised one crystalline arm, and the conference chamber fell silent. His ancient face showed the kind of expression that powerful beings wore when they were about to deliver judgment to lesser creatures. The light from the dome above caught his crystal body and threw rainbow patterns across the walls as he prepared to speak. Captain Martinez stood straight beside her team, waiting for words that would determine the future of the human race. The speaker's voice filled the chamber with musical tones that somehow managed to sound both beautiful and condescending at the same time. He spoke of the great honor being offered to humanity, and the wisdom of accepting their place in the natural order of galactic civilization. His words painted a picture of Earth as a young world full of potential, but lacking the maturity to stand among the truly advanced species. The offer came wrapped in diplomatic language, but its meaning was clear enough. Humanity would be granted membership in the Galactic Council as a client race under Vorthak protection. Earth would provide raw materials from their solar system and human workers for construction projects throughout Council space. Human ships would be restricted to cargo hauling, and their military vessels would be decommissioned as unnecessary in a galaxy where the Council maintained peace through superior technology. Captain Martinez listened to the translation with a carefully neutral expression, but Jake could see the anger building behind her eyes. This was not the partnership that Earth had hoped for when they sent their first diplomatic mission to the stars. The aliens were offering slavery dressed up in pretty words and expecting gratitude for the privilege. The Qatari delegate rose from his section of the chamber. His insect body was covered in dark chitin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When he spoke, his voice carried the clicking sounds of his native language mixed with the standard galactic tongue. He addressed the humans directly with words that were meant to sound reassuring but carried clear threats beneath the surface. The delegate explained that human weapons technology was charmingly primitive but completely inadequate for modern warfare. He gestured toward a holographic display that showed the Liberty floating beside the station. The human ship looked crude and ungainly compared to the sleek alien vessels surrounding it. The delegate pointed out the obvious weapon mounts and the thick armor plating with the tone of an adult explaining toys to children. Jake felt his jaw clench as the alien continued his analysis of human military capabilities. The Qatari delegate spoke of fusion reactors as if they were campfires and described human railguns as glorified slingshots. He explained that council ships used quantum shield technology that could withstand the heat and pressure found in the cores of stars. What possible threat could human kinetic weapons pose against such defenses? Communications Officer Danny Roberts was monitoring alien transmissions throughout the chamber, and the news was not encouraging. The various species were discussing humanity, like scientists examining an interesting but harmless specimen. Some expressed curiosity about human culture, while others debated the best ways to exploit human labor. None of them seemed to consider the possibility that Earth might refuse the Council's generous offer. Science Officer Patricia Young was running passive scans of everything in the chamber while trying not to attract attention to her activities. Her instruments were picking up energy signatures and technology patterns that human science had never encountered. The alien shields and weapon systems operated on principles that Earth's best scientists could barely imagine. Yet something about the readings bothered her in a way she could not quite identify. Engineer Susan Hayes was analyzing the station's power distribution through her handheld scanner. The energy flows she detected were massive beyond anything humans had ever built, but they followed patterns that seemed oddly familiar. The aliens had clearly mastered technologies that humanity was just beginning to understand, but their basic engineering principles were not so different from human approaches. Chief, Petty Officer Ryan Clark was taking detailed readings of every piece of technology he could observe. His instruments were recording data on shield frequencies and weapon signatures that might prove valuable if things went badly. The aliens seemed completely unconcerned about human observation, as if nothing Earth possessed could threaten their advanced systems. Captain Martinez finally found her voice and requested permission to consult with her government before accepting the Council's offer. Her words were carefully diplomatic, but everyone in the chamber understood that she was buying time. Speaker Vexthul granted the request with the indulgent patience of someone who already knew what the final answer would be. The human delegation was escorted to guest quarters aboard the station while they waited for Earth's response. The rooms were comfortable and well appointed, but Jake noticed the subtle security measures that would prevent any unauthorized movement. They were guests, but they were also prisoners until they accepted the Council's terms. During the waiting period, Jake gathered his team for a private conference in their shielded quarters. Danny Roberts reported that alien communications were becoming more active as various species discussed how to divide up human resources once Earth accepted client status. Patricia Young shared her analysis of the alien technology she had observed and pointed out some interesting weaknesses in their seemingly perfect systems. The breakthrough came when Susan Hayes compared her engineering data with Patricia's scientific readings. The alien shields were incredibly advanced and could deflect any known form of energy weapon. They could also handle exotic matter and dimensional attacks that human science barely understood. But their design showed one critical gap that their creators had never bothered to address. The Council species had been fighting each other for millions of years using the same basic types of weapons and defenses. Their technology had evolved to counter specific threats, but had never encountered anything truly different. Human weapons development had followed a completely separate path, based on different principles and different materials. Ryan Clark had been analyzing the energy signatures of alien shield systems, and his readings confirmed Susan's theory. The quantum fields that protected Council ships were tuned to deflect the types of attacks they expected to face. They had never been tested against simple kinetic projectiles traveling at relativistic velocities or electromagnetic pulses designed to disrupt quantum processors. The communication from Earth arrived after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The message was brief and to the point. The President and Congress had reviewed the Council's offer and found it unacceptable. Humanity would seek membership as an equal partner or not at all. Captain Martinez was authorized to withdraw the delegation if necessary and return to Earth. Wendy. The human team returned to the conference chamber. The atmosphere had changed noticeably. The casual arrogance was still there, but it was now mixed with irritation and impatience. Speaker Vexthul listened to Captain Martinez read Earth's response with the expression of someone who had expected better from a supposedly intelligent species. The speaker's reply was swift and final. The Council had made their generous offer and would not negotiate further. Humanity could accept client status or remain isolated in their primitive solar system. There would be no third option and no further discussion of the matter. That was when the Qatari delegate revealed the trap that had been prepared all along. Long-range sensors showed a massive battle fleet approaching Nexus Prime from the outer system. 20 Qatari warships were moving toward the station in perfect formation. Their arrival was not coincidence but careful planning designed to demonstrate the futility of human resistance. The delegate explained that the battle fleet had been positioned to respond to any aggressive moves by the human delegation. If the Liberty attempted to leave without accepting Council authority, it would be destroyed as an example to other primitive species who might consider defying galactic law. The humans could surrender their ship and accept transport back to Earth as honored guests, or they could test their weapons against proven Qatari technology. Jake looked at his crew and saw determination, rather than fear in their faces. Danny Roberts was already calculating firing solutions while Patricia Young was preparing her scientific instruments to record whatever happened next. Susan Hayes was checking power levels and weapon systems with the calm efficiency of someone who had trained for exactly this moment. Captain Martinez made one final attempt at diplomacy, but the Qatari delegate cut her off with a dismissive gesture. The time for talking was over and the time for demonstration had arrived. The human ship would surrender immediately or face the consequences of challenging superior technology. Commander Jake Sullivan stepped forward and spoke the words that would echo through galactic history. He looked directly at the assembled alien representatives and delivered humanity's final answer with quiet dignity. Earth would not bow down to alien superiority, and the Liberty would not surrender without a fight. If the Council wanted to test their advanced technology against human weapons, they were welcome to try. The conference chamber erupted in what might have been laughter from a dozen different species. The Liberty undocked from Nexus Prime with all the ceremony of a funeral procession. Alien ships positioned themselves at safe distances to watch the demonstration, while the Qatari battle fleet moved into attack formation. 20 sleek warships surrounded the single human vessel like wolves circling a wounded deer. Their hulls were black as space itself and covered with weapon ports that glowed with barely contained energy. Commander Jake Sullivan stood at his position on the bridge and watched the enemy ships take their positions. His crew worked with calm efficiency, despite knowing they were outnumbered 20-1 by vessels that represented the pinnacle of galactic military technology. The odds were impossible, but these were the same humans who had fought impossible odds throughout their history and somehow managed to survive. Communications Officer Danny Roberts was monitoring transmissions between the Qatari ships. Their commander was broadcasting on all frequencies, making sure that every species in the sector would witness the destruction of the primitive human vessel. The alien captain spoke of teaching proper respect to upstart races who dared to challenge Council authority. His words were meant to intimidate, but they only served to strengthen human resolve. The Qatari fleet commander opened a channel to the Liberty and offered one final chance for surrender. His insect face filled the main screen, showing compound eyes that reflected no mercy and mandibles that clicked with anticipation. He promised that the human crew would be treated as prisoners of war if they surrendered immediately, but warned that continued resistance would result in complete destruction. Jake looked at his bridge crew and saw the same determination in their faces that had carried humanity from caves to the stars. Science Officer Patricia Young was monitoring alien shield frequencies and weapon signatures. Engineer Susan Hayes was checking power distribution and weapon systems. Tactical Officer Greg Mason was calculating firing solutions and defensive maneuvers. Every person on the bridge was ready to do their duty, regardless of the consequences. The human commander opened a return channel to the Qatari fleet and delivered his response with the quiet dignity that marked the best of his species. The Liberty would not surrender, and Earth would not bow to alien threats. If the Council wanted to test their advanced technology against human ingenuity, they were welcome to try. The transmission ended with Jake giving the order that every crew member had been waiting to hear. Battle stations rang throughout the ship as the Liberty prepared for combat. Blast doors sealed compartments while crew members secured loose equipment and checked their emergency gear. The fusion reactors increased power output to maximum levels, while weapon systems came online with the smooth precision of machinery that had been built by people who understood that reliability meant survival. The Qatari ships opened fire with a coordinated salvo that lit up space like a miniature sun. Plasma cannons sent streams of superheated gas racing toward the human vessel, while particle beams lanced through the void at near light speed. Exotic energy weapons that operated on principles unknown to human science added their own deadly contributions to the attack. The combined firepower was enough to vaporize a small moon. The Liberty's shields flared as they absorbed the incoming energy. The entire ship shook under the impact, but the defensive systems held. Human shield technology was primitive compared to the quantum fields used by Council species, but it was also robust and reliable. Where alien shields were elegant and efficient, human defenses were built to take punishment and keep working under the worst possible conditions. Tactical Officer Greg Mason reported shield status with the calm professionalism that marked veteran spacers. The barriers were holding at 60% strength and power distribution was stable. The alien weapons were incredibly powerful, but they were also predictable in their targeting and timing. Human defensive systems had been designed to handle concentrated fire from multiple directions. The real surprise came when Jake gave his first attack order. Instead of firing the main weapons, he called for deployment of what appeared to be simple debris. The Liberty released a cloud of metallic objects that drifted toward the alien formation like harmless space junk. The Qatari ships ignored the objects completely as they focused their fire on the human vessel. Engineer Susan Hayes had spent months preparing those seemingly innocent pieces of metal. Each one contained electromagnetic pulse generators powered by miniature fusion cells. The devices were crude by alien standards, but they were also completely unexpected. The Qatari had never encountered an enemy who would use such primitive technology in modern space combat. As the alien ships passed through the debris field, the electromagnetic pulses began to activate. The effects were subtle at first, with minor fluctuations in power systems and brief communication interruptions. But as more devices triggered, the cumulative effect began to overwhelm the sophisticated alien electronics that controlled everything, from weapons to life support systems. Communications Officer Danny Roberts reported that the Qatari ships were experiencing system failures across their entire fleet. Their quantum processors were having trouble adapting to the chaotic electromagnetic interference that human technology was generating. The elegant alien computers that could calculate hyperdimensional trajectories were being disrupted by simple radio static. The moment Jake had been waiting for finally arrived. The Qatari shields were wavering as their control systems struggled to maintain coherence in the electromagnetic chaos surrounding them. The alien ships were still dangerous, but their perfect defenses now had gaps that human weapons could exploit. The commander gave the order that would change the course of galactic history. Main guns fired with the thunder of electromagnetic coils, accelerating tungsten penetrators to significant fractions of light speed. The Liberty's primary weapons were not energy-based like the exotic systems used by Council species. They were simple railguns that threw solid metal projectiles using brute force and human engineering. The aliens had never seen anything like them in millions of years of galactic warfare. The tungsten rods struck Qatari shields that had been designed to deflect energy beams and exotic particles. The quantum fields that could turn aside star fire offered little resistance to dense metal traveling at relativistic velocities. 3 alien ships suffered critical damage in the first salvo as solid projectiles punched through their hulls. and devastated their internal systems. Panic spread through the Qatari fleet as they realized that their supposedly primitive opponent possessed weapons that could penetrate their defenses. Emergency signals flooded the communication channels as damaged ships called for assistance, while their companions tried to understand how simple kinetic weapons could be so effective against advanced technology. The alien fleet commander demanded reinforcements from the Council Defense Force while ordering his ships to fall back and regroup. His previous confidence was replaced by the desperate calculations of someone who suddenly realized that victory was no longer certain. The primitive human vessel had just demonstrated that advanced did not always mean superior. Jake pressed his advantage by ordering deployment of the Liberty's secondary weapon systems. Weapons Officer Carl Johnson activated launch tubes that had been disguised as simple cargo bays. The objects that emerged looked nothing like the sleek missiles used by other species. They were crude metal cylinders driven by chemical rockets and guided by simple computer systems. The Qatari point defense systems tried to intercept the incoming projectiles, but their targeting computers were still disrupted by electromagnetic interference. Most of the human missiles reached their targets where they revealed their true nature, as hunter-killer drones carrying nuclear warheads. The aliens had abandoned atomic weapons millions of years ago as too crude for civilized warfare. Nuclear fire blossomed among the Qatari ships as the primitive human weapons found their marks. The alien shields were designed to handle the elegant energy weapons used by Council species, but they had never been tested against the raw fury of splitting atoms. Several more enemy vessels suffered critical damage as radiation and electromagnetic pulses wreaked havoc with their delicate systems. Science Officer Patricia Young was coordinating with Engineer Susan Hayes to implement their masterstroke. The passive scans they had conducted during the diplomatic meetings were finally paying dividends. They had analyzed the shield harmonics of every Council ship in the area and discovered the frequencies that controlled their defensive systems. The next salvo of railgun projectiles was different from the first. Each tungsten rod was magnetically charged to vibrate at precise frequencies calculated to disrupt specific types of shields. The solid metal penetrators slipped through quantum barriers like ghosts passing through walls. The results were even more devastating than the initial attack. The Qatari flagship suffered a direct hit to its command section as a tungsten rod punched through supposedly impenetrable defenses. The bridge was holed, and atmosphere vented into space, carrying alien crew members with it. Emergency bulkheads sealed the breach, but the damage was already done. The pride of the Qatari fleet was crippled by a weapon their designers had never imagined. The Qatari fleet was in complete disarray, as their supposedly superior technology failed against human weapons that should not have been effective. Damaged ships vented atmosphere and debris into space, while their crews struggled to understand how their perfect defenses had been penetrated so easily. Emergency signals flooded the communication channels as the alien commander called desperately for reinforcements from the Council Defense Force. Commander Jake Sullivan watched the chaos through the Liberty's main screen and felt no satisfaction in the destruction he was witnessing. War was never something to celebrate, even when victory meant survival. But he also knew that sometimes violence was the only language that arrogant species understood. The galaxy had offered humanity slavery disguised as membership, and now they were learning the price of underestimating Earth's children. The battle was far from over despite the damage already inflicted on the enemy fleet. The surviving Qatari ships were regrouping and adapting their tactics to deal with the unexpected threat posed by human weapons. Their quantum processors were analyzing the electromagnetic interference and developing countermeasures that would restore their shield effectiveness. Time was working against the Liberty as the aliens learned from their mistakes. Communications Officer Danny Roberts reported increasing chatter between the alien vessels as their officers coordinated new attack patterns. The Qatari were sharing tactical data and redistributing their formation to minimize the effectiveness of human railgun fire. They were also calling up reserve power to boost their shield strength and overcome the electromagnetic disruption that had caught them off guard. Science Officer Patricia Young was monitoring the changes in alien energy signatures as their ships adapted to the new threat environment. The quantum fields protecting enemy vessels were becoming more stable as their control systems compensated for the interference. The window of opportunity that had allowed human weapons to penetrate their defenses was slowly closing as superior, alien technology reasserted itself. Jake knew that conventional tactics would not be enough to defeat an enemy that could adapt faster than humans could improvise. The Liberty needed to reveal more of its hidden capabilities before the Qatari figured out how to neutralize the advantages that Earth's weapons provided. It was time to show the galaxy what human creativity could accomplish when survival was at stake. Weapons Officer Carl Johnson activated systems that had been carefully concealed within the Liberty's hull structure. What the aliens had dismissed as simple cargo bays and maintenance hatches suddenly opened to reveal launch tubes for humanity's most unconventional weapons. The objects that emerged looked like nothing in the standard galactic arsenal, and that was exactly what made them so dangerous. The hunter-killer drones that deployed from the Liberty were crude by alien standards, but they embodied a different philosophy of warfare that the Council species had never encountered. Where alien weapons relied on sophisticated targeting systems and exotic energy sources, human drones were simple, cheap, and numerous. Each unit carried a basic artificial intelligence and a single nuclear warhead. The Qatari point defense systems tried to engage the incoming swarm, but their targeting computers were designed to handle the predictable flight paths of standard missiles. The human drones moved with erratic patterns that seemed almost random, but were actually based on combat algorithms developed through centuries of warfare on Earth. They jinked and weaved through defensive fire like living creatures avoiding. Predator's nuclear detonations began blossoming throughout the alien formation as the simple human weapons found their targets. The Qatari shields could deflect exotic energy beams and dimensional attacks, but they were not prepared for the crude fury of splitting atoms. Electromagnetic pulses from the nuclear explosions added to the chaos already disrupting alien electronics throughout the battle zone. Engineer Susan Hayes was coordinating the drone attacks from her station in the engineering section. Her displays showed the locations and status of every weapon in the swarm as they closed with their targets. The drones were too simple to be hacked by alien countermeasures and too numerous to be stopped by conventional point defense systems. They represented the human approach to overwhelming problems through sheer persistence and numbers. The alien fleet commander was broadcasting increasingly desperate requests for assistance as his formation continued to take casualties from weapons he could barely comprehend. The elegant Qatari warships were being damaged by technology that their civilization had abandoned as primitive millions of years ago. The psychological impact was almost as devastating as the physical destruction. Admiral Chen Zhao finally responded to the calls for help by ordering the Council Defense Force to intervene in the battle. Additional ships began moving toward the combat zone from their positions around Nexus Prime. These were not just Qatari vessels, but representatives of all the major Council species, including the crystalline Vorthak and the energy-based Luminari. Jake realized that the Liberty was about to face overwhelming odds as fresh enemy forces joined the battle. The human ship had proven that it could defeat Qatari technology, but the Council possessed weapons and defenses that operated on completely different principles. Energy beings and crystal entities might not be vulnerable to the same tactics that had worked against insect warriors. The reinforcing ships opened fire as soon as they entered weapons range, adding their exotic energy beams to the plasma cannons and particle weapons already targeting the Liberty. The combined firepower was beyond anything the human ship had faced, and the defensive shields began to buckle under the increased pressure. Warning alarms sounded throughout the vessel as power systems struggled to maintain protection. Tactical. Officer Greg Mason reported that shield strength was dropping rapidly under the concentrated alien fire. The electromagnetic pulse weapons that had disrupted Qatari systems were having less effect on the more advanced Vorthak and Luminari vessels. Their technology was different enough from standard Council equipment that human countermeasures were not as effective. But the Liberty still had surprises that the aliens had not anticipated. Chief Petty Officer Ryan Clark had been analyzing enemy communications and shield frequencies throughout the battle. His passive sensors had mapped the harmonic patterns of every ship in the enemy formation. The data he had collected would enable one final demonstration of human tactical thinking. Jake ordered implementation of the weapons modification that Patricia Young and Susan Hayes had developed during their analysis of alien technology. The railgun projectiles in the Liberty's magazines were equipped with variable frequency generators that could adjust their magnetic signatures in flight. Each tungsten rod became a precisely tuned instrument designed to slip through specific shield configurations. The next salvo was humanity's masterpiece of applied physics and tactical analysis. Every projectile was targeted at a specific enemy vessel and tuned to penetrate that ship's unique defensive frequency. The solid metal rods passed through quantum barriers and energy fields as if they did not exist. The results were devastating, beyond anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Orthac crystal ships shattered like glass as tungsten penetrators found their cores. Luminary energy vessels collapsed as their containment fields failed under kinetic impact. Even the heavily armored Qatari warships suffered critical damage as solid projectiles punched through hulls that should have been impenetrable. In a matter of seconds, the Council's most advanced warships were reduced to drifting debris. The surviving alien crews broadcast surrender signals as their proud fleets burned around them. The beings who had ruled the galaxy for millions of years suddenly found themselves at the mercy of a species they had dismissed as primitive. The psychological shock was as complete as the military defeat they had just suffered. Communications channels filled with desperate calls for ceasefire as alien commanders tried to prevent further destruction of their forces. The demonstration of human military effectiveness had exceeded every possible expectation and left the Council species reeling from the implications. Their technological superiority was not as absolute as they had believed. Jake ordered his weapons to cease fire, but kept them trained on the surviving alien ships. The Liberty had proven its point with devastating effectiveness, but the human commander knew that victory in battle was meaningless without achieving the strategic objectives that had brought them to this point. It was time to see if the Galactic Council was ready to negotiate from a position of mutual respect. The bridge of the Liberty was quiet except for the hum of electronics and the whisper of ventilation systems. Every crew member understood that they had just participated in a moment that would change galactic history. Humanity had announced its arrival on the interstellar stage with a demonstration that would be remembered for millennia to come. Speaker. Vexthol's voice finally broke the silence as he requested permission to open negotiations with the human delegation. The arrogance was gone from his crystalline features, replaced by something that looked very much like respect. The Council was ready to discuss humanity's place in galactic civilization, and this time they would be talking to equals rather than clients. The silence that followed the ceasefire was unlike anything the galaxy had experienced in millions of years. Debris from the most advanced warships ever built drifted through space while their surviving crews tried to process the impossible reality of defeat at the hands of a supposedly primitive species. The Galactic Council that had ruled among the stars since before humanity learned to use fire was suddenly forced to confront the limits of their own power. Commander Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Liberty and surveyed the aftermath of a battle that would reshape interstellar civilization. His ship bore the scars of combat, with hull plating blackened by alien energy weapons and shield generators running at minimal power. But the Liberty was still intact, while the pride of the Council fleet drifted as wreckage around Nexus Prime. Communications. Officer Danny Roberts was monitoring transmissions across every frequency as word of the battle spread throughout the sector. Ships from dozens of different species were relaying the impossible news that human weapons had defeated Council technology. The reports were met with disbelief and demands for confirmation, but the evidence was floating in space for all to see. Science. Officer Patricia Young was analyzing the wreckage of alien vessels to understand exactly how human weapons had achieved such devastating effects. Her instruments detected exotic materials and energy signatures that represented technologies beyond anything Earth had ever encountered. Yet all that advanced knowledge had been rendered useless by simple projectiles thrown with enough force and precision. The first response came from Speaker Vexthul, whose crystalline form appeared on the Liberty's main screen. The ancient being, who had spoken so condescendingly about human primitiveness, now showed expressions that might have been uncertainty or even fear. His rainbow pattern shifted in ways that suggested deep contemplation as he struggled to find words for a situation no council leader had ever faced. The speaker requested permission to resume negotiations with the human delegation under what he carefully termed revised circumstances. The arrogance was completely gone from his voice, replaced by the cautious respect that one showed to dangerous equals. He acknowledged that the Council may have misjudged humanity's capabilities and expressed willingness to discuss alternative arrangements for Earth's membership. Captain Lisa Martinez returned to her role as chief negotiator, but the power dynamic had shifted dramatically in favor of the human position. She no longer spoke as a supplicant seeking admission to galactic civilization, but as the representative of a species that had proven its ability to defend itself against any threat. The Council would have to offer genuine partnership or risk continued conflict with an opponent they could not easily defeat. The Luminary delegate manifested as a shimmering column of energy that pulsed with what might have been nervous tension. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that suggested deep confusion about the tactical principles that had led to Council defeat, the energy being admitted that human combat doctrine was completely outside their previous experience and represented a fundamental challenge to accepted military theory. Engineer Susan Hayes reported from the engine room that all systems were stable despite the damage sustained during the battle. The Liberty's fusion reactors were operating within normal parameters, and the electromagnetic railguns were ready for immediate action if negotiations broke down. Human engineering had proven its worth against the most advanced technology the galaxy could deploy. The Qatari delegate who had spoken so dismissively about human weapons now appeared via hologram from his damaged flagship. His insect features showed expressions that translated as profound respect mixed with wariness. He admitted that his species had never encountered an enemy capable of penetrating their shields with simple kinetic weapons, and requested detailed information about human tactical doctrine. Jake found himself in the unusual position of explaining human military philosophy to beings who had dominated the galaxy for millions of years. He spoke about the human tendency to find practical solutions to complex problems and the willingness to use whatever tools were available to achieve victory. While aliens had perfected elegant weapon systems, humans had focused on reliability and effectiveness. The breakthrough in negotiations came when Admiral Chen Zhao made an unexpected admission, the crystalline being acknowledged that the Council had become complacent in their technological superiority and had forgotten that innovation could come from unexpected directions. He proposed a new relationship where humanity would contribute their unique perspective to galactic defense in exchange for full membership rights. Chief Petty Officer Ryan Clark had been analyzing the tactical data collected during the battle, and his conclusions were startling even to the human crew. The alien ships they had defeated represented thousands of years of technological development and manufacturing resources that exceeded Earth's entire industrial capacity. Yet human weapons had destroyed them, with an efficiency that suggested fundamental flaws in Council military thinking. The implications extended far beyond simple military victory. If human technology could defeat Council defenses so completely, then other aspects of alien civilization might be equally vulnerable to fresh approaches and innovative thinking. The galaxy had achieved stability through technological stagnation, and humanity represented a disruptive force that could drive progress in unexpected directions. Weapons Officer Carl Johnson was conducting post-battle analysis of the Liberty's weapon systems, and the results confirmed what everyone already suspected. Human weapons had performed beyond their design specifications, not because they were superior to alien technology, but because they operated on principles that Council defenses had never been designed to counter. The formal negotiations resumed in the main conference chamber of Nexus Prime, but the atmosphere was completely different from the original meeting. The various alien species now treated the human delegation with the careful respect normally reserved for dangerous predators. Every word was chosen with precision, as the Council members tried to avoid triggering another demonstration of human military capabilities. Captain Martinez presented Earth's revised terms for membership in galactic civilization, and the demands were significantly more ambitious than anything humanity had originally dared to request. Full voting rights in Council decisions, shared access to alien technology, and the establishment of human colonies throughout Council space were just the beginning of what Earth now expected as compensation for their military contributions. The Response from the Council was swift and positive, as the various species competed to offer inducements that would secure human alliance. The Vorthak promised access to their manufacturing technology, while the Luminari offered to share their knowledge of energy manipulation. Even the Qatari expressed interest in joint military exercises to learn from human tactical innovation. Tactical Officer Greg Mason was monitoring the approach of additional ships from across the sector as news of the battle attracted attention. From species that had never interacted with the Council, some were potential allies drawn by the possibility of challenging galactic authority, while others were enemies who saw opportunity in Council weakness. The victory had implications that extended far beyond simple diplomatic recognition. Jake realized that humanity had achieved something more significant than military victory or political recognition. They had demonstrated that the galaxy's existing power structure was not as stable as it appeared, and that innovation could triumph over established superiority. The Council would never again be able to dismiss challenges from supposedly primitive species. The final agreement was signed aboard the Liberty rather than in the Council chambers as a symbolic recognition of humanity's new status. Earth became not just another member species, but a key partner in galactic defense with the right to establish colonies throughout Council space and access to technologies that would accelerate human development by centuries. As the Liberty prepared to depart Nexus Prime, Jake looked out at the ships that now surrounded his vessel. Where once they had been predators circling prey, they were now escorts honoring a respected ally. The transformation had been achieved not through diplomacy or cultural exchange, but through the simple demonstration that human weapons could reach any target regardless of the defenses protecting it. The journey back to Earth would carry more than just news of successful negotiations. The Liberty's cargo holds were filled with alien technology, and her databanks contained information about civilizations that spanned the galaxy. Humanity was no longer alone among the stars, and had proven that they deserved to stand as equals with species that had ruled space since before humans walked upright. The final transmission from Nexus Prime came from Speaker Vexthal himself, as he offered formal welcome to humanity as full members of galactic civilization. His words carried genuine respect for a species that had earned their place through courage and innovation, rather than simply advanced technology. The Council had learned that true strength came not from perfect weapons, but from the minds that wielded them. Jake smiled as he gave the order to engage the hyperdrive and begin the journey home.